Thanks for being here. We should start by telling people where we are. Do you want to share where we are?
We're in Los Angeles. No, we're in downtown Los Angeles in South Park at the Prism Way office.
And what does the Prism Way do?
Well, at its core, it's a reentry program, but it's also more than that. It's a place where people come to find hope, healing, and restoration. We founded it, myself, Kristen, and Cindy, a couple years ago. It's been about 2 years now. Initially, we were trying to put together a program that goes beyond helping people get their Social Security card, their driver's license, and find a job and housing. We're really trying to create a place where people can just unpack their full potential. As a formerly incarcerated person, we have a lot of things to offer, but the opportunities are not readily available for us. And so we do that here. We help people just achieve their ultimate goals. Like, we have a lot of people that have done 20, 25, 30 years, and they're coming home and they have a skill set, but their age and our crimes, the things that we had done in the past, are preventing us from being able to like walk out that full potential. But you come to the Prism Way, that's what we're doing here.
And I don't know about you guys, but when I walked, this was initially going to be in my backyard, and then I came to meet Alan to chat about doing something like this, and we saw the space, and we were like, well, we should probably just have the conversation here. Smells like pine. It's amazing.
It is.
Yeah, it's a great space. Cindy and Kristen, thank you for letting us use the space. So I'll introduce myself, and then you can introduce yourself. So my name is Lucy. I work at Southern California Public Radio, LAist 89.3. I'm a radio producer. And before that, I was doing sort of like freelance audio, podcasting. Really, I love storytelling. And also, have been volunteering in prisons for the past 10-ish plus years, which is where I met Alan. And I started, like in 2018, I started a podcast called Life on the Outside, which I don't do anymore because I don't have time. But while I was doing it, I thought it would be really cool to talk with someone, but do it in like a community format. It's, podcasts are great, radio's great, TV's great, but it's like, to me, nothing beats just being together and engaging with stories in this way and making conversation available to people publicly and being able to ask questions. That's to me, that's why we're here. That's the purpose of this. And then we can share more how we met, but you can introduce yourself if you want.
All right. So you already know my name is Alan. I am the co-founder and director of the Prism Way. In addition to that, I work with the Human Rights Watch with the National Life Without Parole Leadership Council. I consult for Parole Justice Works. I'm a member of Project Rebound, and I served 28 years in prison. I feel blessed to be here. We have this thing that we say, I'm not supposed to be here. This is like one of those I'm not supposed to be here moments because, when I was sentenced to prison, I was sentenced to death by incarceration. I was never supposed to come home. And I was fortunate enough in 2019 to receive a sentence commutation. And I've been home since 2020. I had the good privilege of meeting Cindy and Kristen a few years ago, about 2 years ago, over cheese toast and spinach or something like that. I was going to tell that they were stalking me. Apparently they found me in a newspaper article and they were calling everybody going, do you know Alan Burnett? How do we get in contact with him? And so we met in the Valley and then it's been like magic ever since.
Awesome. And we met in 2015?
2015.
On a yard at Lancaster State Prison. How long? You were there for 10 years?
I was there. I've been there twice. The last time I was there was from 2009 to 2020. And so at Lancaster, at the institution, like we created our own programs, and a lot of people wanted to learn Spanish. And in my mind, I'm like, well, we need to help the Spanish speaking population, pretty much learn English and also learn some of the curriculum that we were working on, domestic violence, anger management, all those things that they were missing out on. And so we did that, and we had a graduation ceremony after the completion of one of the classes, and then Lucy showed up. And so we met over, I don't want to say prison food, but it was prison food in a conversation.
I don't remember that actually.
I remember it.
But yeah, and then over the years, we've gotten to know each other really well. We've had like so many conversations, mostly on a yard. Like I would just come and we would chat for hours in the chapel or in a classroom. That's to say, there's so many different conversations we could have today. There's so much to talk about when we talk about like incarceration and the prison system. I think today we're interested in having the conversation that is about like getting out, like what happens afterward, what happens when you step out of prison after being in for 20, 30, 20, 30, 40 years. It's such a unique experience, and it's one that has kind of gripped me for years. It's why I started a podcast about it. Like it's just a story that I'm really fascinated by. So we're going to talk sort of about that reentry. And I wonder, Alan, if you could if we could start by maybe you taking us back to, I've asked you this before, but that moment that you got out after, was it 28 years you said?
Yeah.
I know you had a huge group of people that were there to welcome you home, and I wonder if you could kind of share where, like what that felt like, and if you were even able to fully process what was going on at that time.
All right, let me try to throw myself
it's
back
a big
into
place
that.
to start.
It was unreal. I'll say that. And I've spoken about this a lot in the past, but it was unbelievable. I mean, I was from the age of 18 to 46, I was told that I was never going to get out of prison. So even when they called me and they said, "Hey, you're going home," like I didn't believe it, And while I was walking out the gate, I was waiting on them to say, "Come back, we made a mistake," And then while we were in the van traveling from the institution to the front of the institution, I was waiting on them to say, "We don't have your paperwork," or "We made a mistake, your name's spelled wrong," or "Something's the matter with your paperwork, you're going back." And then when I got out, it was one of the most important moments in my life. I got to see, people who I wanted to see. There were people there, people who weren't there that I wish that it would have been there, but they just weren't. But I think it really got real to me is when, after we left the institution, we ended up going to like a beach, and I was able to stand like on a cliff and see something that I had only imagined seeing for almost 3 decades, and that was the ocean. And that's when it became real. Like I was home, and I would just have these moments throughout, my reentry process where I'd be driving, or, I'd be going to the grocery store, or just walking, and then it's like it would hit me like, you're free, So it was a powerful moment. It was a series of powerful moments, and like even today, as I'm sitting here talking about it, I'm just, I'm reminded, like, I'm free. So.
Do you remember even interacting with the world in a tangible way, or just like smells, or I've heard so many people talk about seeing trees for the first time when they get out. Like there's no trees on prison yard, there's no green. People go decades without seeing a tree, which is wild to me. And I'm so interested in how people what the sensory experience is like. I know it can be really harsh too when people walk into like a 7-Eleven or a grocery store, and it's just overwhelming. I wonder if you had like experiences like that where you felt overwhelmed or just in awe of the beauty around you?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes or no question.
It was a yes or no question. Well, the first day I was home, like a few hours after, not even a few hours, maybe 30 minutes after I've gotten out, I went to Target, or it was Walmart, and I saw a robot like that cleans the aisles just passed by, and it was like I couldn't understand what that meant, you know. It's still kind of hard because I don't see that robot anymore. Maybe my mind was playing trick. I don't know. But in terms of like the real sensory overload, it was the following day I got a chance to be with my sister, and my sister and I were at the Long Beach Pike area, and we were leaning over this rail and we were looking at the water, and that's when it hit me. You know, it was like me and my sister have an emotional connection. It's my sister. We were raised in the same household. We have the same DNA. I love my sister. I've missed my sister for years, but to be there and experiencing that with her, that just brought me to tears. And it wasn't just that part. It was actually just looking at the water and just watching the water move and smelling the water and like hearing the water. It was quiet, and it was the most, I'm going to call my sister after this and talk to her about this.
It makes me think too, we've talked about this, but there's something really different about people that were sentenced to life in prison or life without the possibility of parole. The reentry is really different because you haven't spent one or 2 or 3 years in prison. You've spent decades, like decades and decades in prison. And so much has changed. People get out not knowing how to use a cell phone, not knowing how to use an ATM machine, not having seen the ocean for 30 years. I wonder if you can share, like, as someone who was sentenced, or just expand on how it's different to come home as a lifer or someone with LWOP than maybe someone who did a short term.
I can't really speak to, well, first of all, let me just say this. I am the person who believes that there's always should be some accountability and responsibility for the harm that you cause, you know? And so with that being said, I can't really speak to the experiences for a person who had a life sentence, but I can touch on having a life without the possibility of parole. There's a huge difference because a person who has a life sentence knows that eventually they will go in front of the parole board and they will have an opportunity to come home. Having life without the possibility of parole means that you are excluded from participating in programs that put you in a position to where you can go to the parole board and be successful. Having a life sentence excludes you from education. It excludes you from just a wide variety of programs, from being out past 8 o'clock at one point to even going to other institutions where they have parole or institutions that was closer to your house. Like, having that sentence meant every day that you would wake up and you knew that this was going to be what your whole entire day looks like. It lulls you to sleep. It's soul crushing. It's damaging to your psyche. And it's the most painful thing that I've ever experienced in my life, next to losing my mother while I was incarcerated. It's like they're like neck and neck. And so there would be times like while I was incarcerated where I would really have these like out of body experiences to help me deal with having life without the possibility of parole. I needed to like really take my mind and go someplace where I felt comfortable. And that was like to my childhood home, trying to remember what the carpet felt like under my feet. Remember watching television with my sister or sliding down the stairs in the laundry basket and eating hot dogs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like different things like that. And because the time while I was incarcerated, it felt like I was just losing everything that I had, and it was even my memory. It was like you'd write a whole paragraph on a chalkboard and someone would take an eraser and go this way and go that way. And slowly but surely, like the different sentences. And this is what was happening to me while I was incarcerated. So, you know, having that opportunity to come home, and I'll just speak on this a little bit, like it's been good, and it's been challenging, because the one thing that I wanted to do was come home and see my family, and they weren't there. The people who I was like always dreamed about, like who I would see when I got out, they were gone. And so I found myself, you know, depressed a lot, you know, and I would go back to that place, but now I could physically go there. So I parked in front of my home when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, like a creep, looking at the house, like, you know, the trees and everything, and just remembering like, this is where I come from. You know, it was really hard to come out and still feel like that I belonged in the world. But going back to these places was what I needed to remind me that I was a part of this world before I, you know, committed my life crime and went to prison, and where I was supposed to, you know, eventually die. So.
And that's something we've talked about too, is like, there's no, when someone steps out of prison after serving this sentence that we have decided they should serve, there's no welcome home. There's not even, you know, a lot of people don't get picked up. They're getting on a train, they're going to Union Station, and they're somehow making their way to their transitional housing. Mm-hmm. I mean, some people get out with tons of support, and some people get out with no support. There's great organizations that are doing fantastic things, and we're seeing more and more of it because like the landscape has changed so much in California in the past decade. More people are getting out of prison than have ever gotten out of prison. People are getting commuted, and still, you know, there are men and women being released every week. And I actually saw it. I don't know if I maybe shared this the other day, but I went to pick someone up from Union Station once, and while we were waiting for this person who we were told has gotten out of prison and he needs a ride and he doesn't know anyone, while we were waiting in Union Station, we saw someone else, and he was wearing gray sweatpants, basically a gray tracksuit. You know, you like pay attention, he's got a trash bag full of his property, and he looks just completely lost. Like someone just plopped him down in the middle of Los Angeles. And so we went up to him and we said, like, can we help you? Like, did you just get out? And he said, yeah, like I just did 35 years. Who's picking you up? Like, are you calling someone? And he pulls out a piece of paper from his pocket, and it just has his daughter's phone number scribbled on it. So we give him a cell phone to use. He has no idea how to use it. He asks us to call her. I mean, just all these things where people aren't set up for any kind of success. You're also, I don't know if it's still $200, but you're given gate money when you get out.
$200.
Which is $200. And it's in the form of like an ATM card.
Yeah, that's just
which is, you know, just a joke because a lot of people don't know how to use ATM machines. Anyway, it was like, will never forget seeing this man standing there, so lost. And I think about those people often who've done life sentences, who are getting out with so little support too, and the world has changed drastically. Can you like share with us, 28 years, a lot has changed, like a lot. Can you share like some of those first, like, whoa, cars are different, or like, whoa, like, I don't know. What stood out to you?
The freeway. I was like, this traffic is disgusting. And that was like one of the things. But, you know, everything was, someone told me that I'm seeing the world through rose-colored, you know, lenses once. And so like there is a huge difference. But I just realized that like people don't really communicate with each other, you know, as they did when I was younger. Hold on a second. We're in downtown LA. This happens a lot. You know, there's no hello, how are you doing? There's no genuine conversations that happen among people. They just pass right by each other. And that was me. Like I was saying hello to perfect strangers when I was getting out. I was like, this guy, again, he's kind of creepy, right? But I just felt that it was important to acknowledge people, and people don't really acknowledge each other as much as they did when I was younger, before I was arrested. And
that's something I've heard a lot of from people who've have gotten out after a long time, is like they'll walk down the street and no one makes eye contact with each other. Everyone's just buried in their phone. Yeah. And they're just like, what has happened?
Yeah, it's so impersonal now, and I think the phone has a lot to do with it, because we literally live in the phone. I don't know about y'all, but I spend a lot of time on my phone, so I'm imagining everyone else does too. Look, somebody back there.
Oh, the guy on his phone.
He just outed himself. He's not. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, you know, and it's a tremendous challenge to come home after doing a lot of time and really trying to find your place in the world. And I think that's kind of like what we kind of hang our hat on here at the Prism Way. It's like we are empathetic and we're very intentional about how we approach people and their transition home, you know, because like you can get lost out here and, you know, you can really lose yourself and fall back into substance abuse or into a bad relationship too. And so, yeah.
How prepared did you, like, how much time was there between when you got commuted and when you got out of prison? Or maybe I should say now when you were found suitable for parole and got out, how much time?
About 100 days.
Okay.
Right. It was 100 days from when I was found suitable. But, you know, and it's interesting is that when I was arrested in 1992 during the LA uprising after the Rodney King verdict. And right before I came home, it was right when the George Floyd murder occurred, and they were just tearing up the city. And I was in my cell, and I was just sitting there thinking, like, is this what I'm going back to? You know, because this is what the world looked like when I left, and I'm going right back to it. So I thought that was, that was something.
Weird bookending moments.
Yeah.
I'm wondering too, like, how prepared you felt to get out. I know people spend years and decades doing self-help in prison and therapy, and you come out with all of these like interpersonal skills and like you're some of the most like socially intelligent people that I know, and yet like we haven't prepared you in many ways for some like super practical things.
Right.
I wonder, like, were you aware of that before you got out? Did you feel prepared, or you kind of just?
Well, I used to listen to your show like early in the morning, so I would listen to other people who had gotten out and kind of like what their experiences were. But you're right, I did, God, years of, you know, interpersonal work, cognitive behavioral therapy, so emotional intelligence. Like I can read a room and read people, but I wasn't prepared for like the transition home. One of the saving grace for me was I had developed some really good relationships with people while I was incarcerated, like yourself and Sister Mary Shawn and Heidi Rummel and Elizabeth, like all these great people. And so they were helping me along the way. But even then, you have to think that in California, like we weren't letting anybody out of prison. California was like, we would rather send people to another state to finish their sentences than to let people come home. At one point, there was over 150,000 people that were incarcerated, and I came to prison when they used to call it the pine box days. And they would say the only way you're going to get out of prison is in a pine box. And everybody held on to that mindset. And so I came through prison through that, but I was fortunate enough to get to an institution where the population there was like really forward thinking about how can we humanize ourselves. And in that process, like I was doing all this work. And so knowing that I had life without parole, but still like looking forward to maybe one day I could come home, it was like, that's what it was. But being prepared, I wasn't prepared for everything.
And that's what feels so counterintuitive about our system is like we're asking people to go away for a long time, and then that reentry starts when you get out, when really like reentry should start the minute that you get in.
Right.
Like your journey to whatever you want to call it, rehabilitation, healing, recovery, like it should start in theory. I mean, it's called the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. The day that you get on the yard. And yet for a lot of people, oftentimes because of their sentence, if you're sentenced to life without parole, it's basically expected that you'll live out, you know, your natural life in prison until you die.
Right.
So, you know, there's no incentive to be in courses of any kind.
Right.
And I think it's a mindset maybe that's changing, that reentry really starts inside.
So they're talking about it, and like the people who have gotten out now, we are more informed, and we're giving them the information that they need. Like, what does reentry really look like? And there's something that's been missing, is mental health has really been missing from that. And I was just sharing with some people last month that like you were saying, like as soon as we come to prison, we have a process that we go through. It's like a mini interview, and they ask you like how old you are, what gang you from, what's your race and nationality, and all these different things. How far did you go in college? But there's no real set standard about what do you want to do? What does mental health mean to you? Like these things need to be addressed early on, as soon as a person comes in, to give a person the mindset that, hey, I know that I have to be here for a period of time, but while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and, and start to take care of myself so they can come out better. And that's kind of like where we're lacking. I would say that we're doing a little better. We're trying to catch up with that. And as progressive as our state is, like we're still lacking in that area, but we are leading other states and different things. They're trying to move more towards a restorative justice model here. But really, I think where we're doing better is we're starting to look at the people who have the lived experiences to be the ones to like show us the way to go, show us the way, the Prism Way, right? That's about the third pub I got, so I'm done. I'm not going to throw it up. Okay.
You can keep plugging. I mean, we're here. Okay. They're giving us the space.
Okay. So, and then education, higher education was like a really big thing for me, because when I came home, I immediately, continued my education. And so that was the structure that I needed to help me like fill in the gaps, And so I got out and I went to school, and I had the education component to lean on and a support system there, and got my bachelor's degree and then got my master's degree. And so like I really benefited from being at a place where, interestingly enough, that the population were the ones who were providing all those programs, and education happened to be one of them, in addition to the self-help classes.
Yeah. And I think that's what we see out here too, is like people that have gotten out reaching back. You've created so many of these communities and spaces and nonprofits. I mean, I feel like more and more formerly incarcerated folks are creating like creating the need, like serving people who are still getting out, and
right. Yeah,
you are certainly doing that.
I'm just following behind the path that's already been set, and I mean, that's been like part of the real problem, is that traditionally, if a person goes to prison, they're stigmatized, and there's this narrative about everyone who goes to prison, they're a horrible person, they're a monster, they can't change, we need to send them to die for the rest of their life. We were sending kids to prison for the rest of their life. We have a young man in here who went to jail when he was 15, and he did like all these different things. But us coming out now is we're saying that that's not necessarily true. Like we all have the ability to become better people, and then not just become better people, but to really like give back, to get our PhDs, and to run nonprofits and do all these amazing things, and to work at the Hollywood Bowl and enjoy the shows every couple of weeks, and like all these different things. And really, we have a thing that we practice, and it's the three forms of amends. It's living amends, direct amends, and indirect amends. And we hold on to that. That's like at our core values now. Like we're stepping back out, and we're going back into prisons, and we're actually sharing with the people that are still incarcerated, like, this is what change looked like. You can be a part of this, And then we owe it to the people that we harm, is to be the best versions of ourselves, even prior to getting out of prison too. So,
and to your point, Alan, about sort of the stigmatization, I think we have this idea that like when you get out of prison, like you're done with your time, but unfortunately, like whether you want to call it punishment or not, like it follows you in so many ways. I mean, your ability to vote, your ability to get jobs. I wonder how you like, if you still do come up against your past in that way, or how you did when you first got out, if you were like, whoa, this is going to be with me forever in this specific way where I'm unable to do certain things.
Right. So I think when I came home, I didn't really think about like I can hide, the harm that I caused and just go away and just live a normal life. And I think, as a person who had life without parole, I'd had to step into, my sentence and the harm that I caused, and really show people that there is an opportunity for people to change, and like healing is possible. Jay Jordan, he talks about this bit about collateral damages when people come home from prison. Like I think he talks about the PTA and renting a home or different things, are like, though he's though people have come home, gotten off parole, those things are still come up. And that's one of the things that you ask you when you go and fill out a thing for an apartment. They say, are you been incarcerated? Are you trying to rent a house or trying to adopt a child? Like this is the things that I'm learning. But for me personally, like I just decided I'm going to embrace that. I can never not be, it's a part of my past, but it's also a part of my story. And I think my story is something that I wholeheartedly share out, because my story is not just mine. It's about 3,000 more people that are still incarcerated that have similar stories to me. Like we've all come through these traumatic experiences when we were growing up, whether it was molestation or domestic violence, substance abuse in the home, and they informed the decisions that we made. And no one's talking about that part. They're just talking about the harm that's been caused. So
I wonder too, on the flip side, if you've been surprised when it's come up, like where you've been for the past 28 years, that people have really like chosen to embrace you and like say welcome home or something to that effect. I wonder, like, even if a stranger, if Ken Hartman was here, I'd make him share some experiences he had, but he's not. So
I haven't had like real experiences with people being surprised. Like but I have had like some really wonderful experiences where I've been accepted, and I think just having all you people here today is just a testament of what that looks like, being accepted, for who I am today, and, for the incarcerated and formerly incarcerated population. Yeah.
Sweet. Should we like open it up to like questions and make it interactive in that way and see what happens, or what do you think?
I don't know. What do you all think?
Should we do that? We could talk for a while, but I don't know. I think it's more interesting if we all talk together.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Does anyone have questions for Alan or I? Maybe more so for Alan. Like, yeah. Hey, Lindsay. Lindsay's my coworker at LAist 89.3.
Yeah, I was just wondering, you're talking about coming under a sentence of life without parole, and I'm wondering, with your experience of eventually being able to get parole and get out, like how common is that, generally speaking, or how rare is that?
It's very rare.
And on this, like a second part of that question, I feel like, do you think that should be rethought, like in terms of sentencing for people, because you're talking about just what it does to mental health of like having no absolute possibility like of light at the end of the tunnel, and what's the point of rehabilitating yourself at all if you don't have that?
Right. That's a good question. I appreciate that question. We got lots of time. So it's very rare to get out. It was referred to as a lightning strike, and so far there has been roughly 200 people in California who have gotten out from a life without parole sentence. One of it has to do with the change in law. Like if a person was a youth offender, someone who was, a juvenile offender, someone under the age of 18 who was sentenced to life without parole, like there was different changes in the law that made it possible for them to come home. The other thing is sentence commutation or through the court system. And my sentence was commuted. And it was a gift, it was just an acknowledgement of, my age at the time of the crime and, the things that I've done while incarcerated, but it doesn't mean forgiveness. It doesn't mean that they would forget about the harm that I caused. It was just an opportunity for me to go in front of the parole board and see if I had those redeemable qualities that, that the governor had looked at. In terms of, should it be rethought, the sentence of life without parole? Absolutely. I think it should be rethought. I think that there are people that are incarcerated right now who have the ability to come home and be like contributing people to society. Doesn't mean that there shouldn't be responsibility for the harm that was caused. Doesn't mean that people shouldn't be held accountable for what they've done. But I think that these are my opinions. So if my opinion doesn't sit right with some of you, then I apologize and we could talk about it more, but I'm not trying to, take away from anybody who's a survivor of crime or lost someone to violence. This is just how I feel about it personally. And again, I'm the one probably out of most of the people that are saying accountability, responsibility, you need to, that needs to be a part of the conversation. But I feel like there's redeemable qualities in everybody. Second chances, like we all want a second chance. I think all of us have done something in our life, maybe not to the degree of, taking another human being's life or robbing someone or something like that, but we all turn back to our spirituality and say, can I have a second chance? I can do better, and, we strive to do better. So, yeah.
And also to your point, like there's something like on a really practical level, if you sentence to people to life with the possibility of parole, you're making the prison environment safer for everyone, because people that don't have hope, that have fallen into despair, like that are not programming, that are joining gangs, like it creates a more violent yard. So it's unsafe for people that are incarcerated. It's unsafe for correctional officers. Like just on a really practical level, just if you're going to sentence someone to life, just make it life with the possibility. It's just the possibility. And I think that's what feels, and like I'm looking at Sutina now, who does so much drop LWOP campaigning and work and advocacy. But when you have life without the possibility, like what is left for you to do? So on a really practical level, it can just make the environment much more unsafe. Is that
That's
fair?
That's fair to say as part of it, but it's also been my experiences that, for my experiences, that the people who had life without the possibility of parole were the ones that were really driving the rehabilitation process. Because where I was with, hundreds of people who were sentenced to die in prison, 500-600 people. And it was a point where we came to the conclusion that if we don't do something to change the way that society is thinking about us, then we're all going to die here. And that was the motivation for us to start creating classes, creating programs, and to start trying to seek out something that would get us to higher education. And was from Lancaster at the AR, the Progressive Programming Facility. Is when we started to do that, then that started to bring people. That's how we met you. That's how we met Sister Mary Shawn. That's how we started having the Post-Conviction Justice Project come to the institution, and different organizations come there, and because they seen that the rehabilitative stuff that was taking place there. And it was like, if you weren't involved in bettering yourself, then you were at the wrong place. If you wanted to go mess up, then you need to go over there. But that is another thing I just want to point out too, is with the parole process. The parole process wants you to look at, and I've learned this from my good friend Dara Yin. And Dara said that, when we go to the board, they want you to examine your childhood to determine how you got to a place where you can harm another human being. That's part of it. But if the parole process understands that and they want you to look at that as a society, why are we not looking at our childhood, what's going on in the house, and start addressing those issues there? If a person, we know that every year is the flu, you go get a flu shot to inoculate the flu. Like if you know that childhood trauma leads to, violent crime or drug abuse, substance abuse, and different things like that, why we're not dealing with that? So,
do we also know, and maybe if I can put Sutina on the spot, do we think LWOP will be dropped at any like, what is your hope? And maybe like, sorry, can I ask, or Alan too, like, do we think we're close to it? No, but we're hoping. Yes.
We are hoping, and we're fighting, and it's become like a national thing now. I think just recently, the UN was calling out the United States about their use of LWOP. There's been a lot of things going on in different states. I have other people that I work with from other states that are really fighting, pushing back against the sentence and talking about it. But I think life without the possibility of parole has become so political. Like they don't really want to touch that. You don't want to be the person in your state to say we did away with life without the possibility of parole and think about running for office next year. It's not going to happen. So they're trying to find like different ways to try to make this sentence not just go away, but try to find alternatives to, how do we sentence people? How do we treat people who are incarcerated?
Good question.
Let's go gentleman first here.
Hi. I was just sort of putting myself back when I was a kid, and if I were living in an area where it was scary and I had to join a gang, otherwise I would get hurt or killed or something, how do you say no? I mean, I'd be petrified to say no, and yet I'd be petrified to do what was being ordered for me to do to survive. What do you do? How do you get out of that?
You got to ask for help, but the problem is that most people don't have the opportunity, to ask for help. Some of us have grown up and the whole neighborhood was the same gang, and even if you weren't an active gang member because you lived in that environment or in that area, like people would see you, as part of that gang. A lot of people join gangs for different reasons. Some of them is because there's something lacking in the home and they just need that relationship, that familial relationship. People join gangs because they struggle. The gang, I always say this, the gang doesn't care if you can read, if you can write, if you're ugly, if you're overweight, if you're, they don't care about that. The gang is probably one of the most embracing things that we have, and I feel like everybody wants to be embraced, But I know there's other people who have their hand up, but I would love to defer that question to somebody else who want to speak about that, maybe coming up right in a second or two. But yeah.
Now or later?
Or maybe afterward. We'll go back.
After.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Meredith.
What are tangible things that people who want to get involved supporting people in transition that we can do?
That's a great question. You can support the Prism Way. You can be active on social media. You can be active with your elected official and tell them, like, I don't appreciate what's going on. I want to see change. Y'all work for me. Essentially that's what it is. Like, you work for me. Become partnerships with, reentry programs, like really get involved, volunteer. But it really takes the individuals who haven't had the impact of incarceration to really speak up, because, like I say, these are your elected officials. They really need to hear from you, and vote and know what you're voting for too. There was a bill that came out in 2016 to speed up the death penalty, or to give everybody, I think it was life without the possibility of parole, and it was like a false dilemma, you know what I mean? And people weren't really reading what was taking place, and they were voting for some of the wrong things, and it was to speed up the death penalty, and as opposed to giving everyone life without parole. So just be informed and ask questions and sign up here. We'll share information with you, show up.
In addition to the Prism Way, there's so many organizations in LA doing amazing work. There's Partnership for Reentry Program, there's Homeboy, there's Anti-Recidivism Coalition, Transformative in Prison work. Yeah. And everyone's doing different things. I think, even around the holidays, just finding an organization that's writing holiday cards to people who are incarcerated. There's different organizations who provide who will pick up people who don't have anyone to pick them up, bring them a change of clothes. Yeah. And I think first and foremost, listening to the people who've been through it and knowing what they need.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Good question. Nick, hey.
I'm really curious to hear both of your thoughts on the abolition conversation, and do you think it's possible to reach meaningful accountability without prison or without punishment even? What does that look like? That's what I'm curious about.
Good question. Dang.
You want to tackle that question?
I think the abolition conversation is one of the most important conversations that we're having. I think it's misunderstood in a lot of ways, and this is the way I first understood it, is burn all the prison down, burn them all down and let everyone out, which is absolutely not what prison abolition is. And the reason it's so important in the way that I'm starting to engage with it is as an imaginative process. Let's just start by imagining a different way of holding people accountable, because accountability is actually at the very, very core of it. No one is saying we're not holding people accountable. No one is saying there won't be harm, that there shouldn't be consequences. I think the conversation with abolition is about how we hold people accountable, and can we do it in a loving, compassionate way. I have no idea, there are so many people working so hard on this every day, and I think it's going to take a really long time before before maybe we live in a world where we don't have prisons. But I think it's like, the most important conversation to even just imagine. And a lot of abolition too is like upstream stuff. So let's not like, we have prisons and people are in them, but like, what can we do before people even come close to being system impacted, so that maybe we end up in a place where no one is going in, and maybe in that way we run them out of business, because there's so many services and mental health and community homes, and like, if you're a kid deciding whether or not to join a gang, it's like instantly there's someone there to help you. And in that way, abolition will work, because no one will just be going into the system. Yeah.
Excellent.
I read sometimes about abolition.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope.
Do you have any? Yeah.
Well, I mean, California's starting to really fall into this restorative justice model, and they're looking at what's going on in other countries like Germany and Norway, and they're seeing what they're doing. And I can't imagine like within the next couple of years that there won't be any prisons, but I can't imagine in the next couple of years that there will be more progressive steps to make sure that people don't go to prison, just to kind of like support what you're saying.
And I mean, we're closing prisons down in California. We're closing Susanville, we're closing Chuckawalla, we're closing dual vocational facility. Like, we are closing them down. We have like less people than I think we've had in a long time.
Yeah, we got like almost 90,000 people incarcerated. We went from 150,000 to like 90,000, somewhere roughly like that. And I think every year over 30,000 people are coming home in California from prison, so not all of them had done like tremendous amount of years, but people are getting out a lot more, as opposed to when I first came in. Like, when I tell you that they weren't letting anybody out, when California was sending people to Michigan, to Arizona, and all these different places to do time, and people were sleeping on the floors inside the thing and stacked up 3 people to a bunk, and this is what was happening. And build more prisons, that was the answer. Tough on crime, tougher laws, super predators, and all these different narratives that were taking place. So, and 3 strikes, and there's still people in jail right now from 3 strikes. And
I mean, there's so much to say to that too. I will say, like, restorative justice has been a huge part of like the work that Alan and I have engaged with, and I think there are places that have like peacemaking, indigenous folks long before we did. They would bring people together to work stuff out, and the system we have thrives on the offender and the victim being separated immediately. In fact, it's illegal for the offender to even reach out to the victim, and it's not like, I think we think it's punishment just for the person that's committed the harm, but in a lot of ways, it's really punishing to survivors and victims of violent crime too. And I don't think we talk about that enough. I don't think we hear from them enough. So I'm not qualified to speak on behalf of a survivor of crime on their position, but I do know from the survivors of crime who I've spoken to, it's like they get re-traumatized through the system, and that was really a big thing, is that we're not allowed to be in contact with the people that we harmed. And I know for me, it was the last time the survivors of my crimes saw me was when I was 18 years old, and so they were expecting to see the same individual. You saw them at your parole board hearing. Yeah.
And I will say this, that our current system should be bringing people together to give them an opportunity to really see and have a conversation with that person, because they shouldn't wait until someone's going to parole and then reach out to them and say, hey, you need to come down here and fight to keep this person in prison, and that's a disservice to them. It really is. And again, I'm not qualified to speak on that. I don't want to say anything else about that. So,
great question, though. Huge topic. Anyone else have? I'll do this first, and then
Good evening, Alice. How long you been out of prison?
Since June of 2020.
Okay, so about 3 years, 3.5 years. with the work that you're doing, traveling the country and stuff, advocating and stuff, not only for life without parole, people still, the laws and stuff that change, the things that you're doing, what keeps you going with the ambition that you have each and every day? When you can continue to just live your life as a decent citizen, or just a regular person, in your own lane, but what you're doing today is what gives you that ambition.
Because I care, the people that are incarcerated, that's my family. Those are the people who I identify with, that, I got up every morning with and walked to breakfast with, and people that mentored me, and I still see the faces and receive the phone calls of those, those men, and now I'm starting to learn a lot more about the women, and they have different needs too, and they're struggling, just like some of the men are. And so that's part of it, is because I care, and I feel like God has given me an opportunity to be free and not just to go and just go run off and just go. It's like, again, getting my sentence commuted was truly a blessing. It was a lightning strike, and it was an opportunity for me to be able to speak to these issues. And the other thing is, like, I feel like that's all I have to do right now is, and once, especially with life without parole, like once life without parole is over, I got to figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life, So, but I mean, I get to do it, and I feel blessed and honored to be a part of the, the formerly incarcerated community. We're the people we're also a marginalized, community that has been just like talked about in a way that, like, it makes it easy for people who haven't been system impacted to say, yeah, they deserve to die in prison, and that's not true, So yeah, because I care.
I'm just overwhelmed, and I think the two of you are so terrific, and I wonder how we can hear more about your project, about you speaking up, because I feel so stupid, not knowing so many of these things, what happens, what it's like there. I think that this has to get out more. How can you do more education, of people of all, to let them know what goes on in the prison? And I never even knew about life without parole or thought about it. I mean, I guess I sort of, but, and I think that's what needs to come out more, to educate people or inform, I should say.
I think that's it right there, is to really just to be on a intentional about educating and informing each other, like all of us, like about life without parole and how it's impacting the people that are incarcerated as well as the people who aren't incarcerated,
And also what happens when you get out, that they just left there, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. She's like, you're out. Figure it out. Yeah, Linda, to me, it's like, it's really about us starting to overlap our communities more. I didn't grow up, I don't think, literally knowing a single person who was system impacted. And now for the past 9 years, they have been my primary community in Los Angeles and truly some of my closest friends. And I think, we often fall into circles and communities of people that look like us and are our age, and we might be, advocates and all this, but we don't actually know each other. And, you can listen to Alan's story on my podcast or watch, you can intake, progressive stuff or whatever, but until we actually know each other, I think that's where it starts, is hopefully community gatherings like this. Yeah, to me, that's kind of where, because that's where the education is. And then we know what to vote for and how to vote, and we know what the needs are, and I think it starts with our relationships with each other and bridging the gap between people who are coming home and have been incarcerated and the rest of us who really care, and we just need to know each other more. right?
Excellent.
We need to be friends.
We need to be friends.
Jack.
Put you on the spot. Put you on the spot. So you brought up what it was like to leave your friends, but like I wanted you to go into farther into that. Like I remember when I would call you, talk about how guilty you would feel sometimes. Like what it's like, man, to leave your friends that you lived for decades knowing that we're just here to die. And all of a sudden you get out, but like they didn't. And I remember when you told me that, you were like that doesn't go away. You know, I wonder if you can talk about that.
Jack's trying to make me.
You would call him from. He would call you from.
He would call me. So Jack had life without parole too. And we were just talking the other day. I said, "You're probably the only person whose call I would take while I was in the shower." I just had the ear thing, because I know like it was important.
How'd you know it was him?
Because I had the earpiece in there and I could hear it. Yeah. So, or I was about to get in the shower. I'm like, I got to go somewhere, but let me just take Jack's call. But so you're special because I'm not taking anybody else's calls while I'm in the shower. So.
Well, it worked. I mean, he's out. It probably helped because he's out.
Yeah, it was a community thing, and so you're talking about like survivor's guilt and just feeling guilty and feeling like unworthy and different things like that. And there is time. That's one of the things that I struggle with in so many areas is like, am I supposed to be here? Do I belong here? Do I just, and all these things, and I don't deserve any of it. It's just, I just been blessed to have the opportunity to be here. But again, it's like leaving prison and seeing people who I just love them. I love them so much. And Martin Curtis Loftus, Kenny Smith, Tyson Atlas, Terry, but like, these are my friends, you know, this is my community, and what has happened to me, I want the same for them, you know? And so I really just wanted to, I want them home, you know? And so, yeah, and thank you for that. You're trying to make me cry up here.
Maybe just a couple more, and then we can just, break. Drink coffee. Yeah.
Lots of coffee.
So I have a lot of questions, but I'll just use one. So you talked about some of the reforms that are, there was the article in the LA Times about all the folks who went to Norway recently and reforming San Quentin. And you also made a really interesting comment that when politician is going to try to run for office on changing our correctional system, it's, they'd have to be a pretty well-established elected official feeling, in their own feeling that they could be reelected. Is there anything on the horizon legislatively that you would want us to be aware of and to be watching so we could educate ourselves? And also, are there any leaders like that we should be kind of learning about in the California legislature or maybe the governor's office that might be rays of hope for the future?
I want to defer. That's a great question, and can I defer to you? Yeah. Here, come up to her. And then to Satina as well, like both.
The both of you can.
Yeah.
I don't know what's on the horizon legislatively for this coming year. There have been several failed attempts at getting an LWOP in any which kind of way in the legislature. And it's a constant struggle, it's a constant push, there's constant conversation, and we reassess every year and think about what is possible. Sometimes when laws come into, when sentences come into law through ballot initiatives, it's much harder to change in the legislature for political reasons. The Supreme Court the California Supreme Court just heard a big case. It wasn't really whether or not we should have LWOP, it was more whether LWOP violates equal protection in the context of a very specific law in California. But it doesn't seem like they have an appetite for doing anything either. So it's a heavy lift. There's been an effort afoot since 2005 or 6. And we did change the law for people who are under 18. And we keep pushing. If there is there is something that's been talked about for quite a few years, which are regulations, which would allow people, and I know Alan can tell the story of his prison document that said it's quite a few years ago, at 30 years, people who had life without parole could go in front of the board and have a hearing, and they removed that possibility, but there's been talk of doing something through the governor's office with regulations to bring that back into being, and then the parole board would recommend someone for a commutation. So lots of different creative ways, a ton of advocates pushing for it, and trying to do the heavy lift. It's sort of, in my opinion, the last big heavy lift in California to at least give everyone a chance to go through the parole board and come home.
And are there any legislators who are champions in this space?
Some of the ones who championed it have been turned out and are no longer there. Is Mia Bonta still there? I don't.
Mia's
You would
still
probably
there.
know some of
I think right now our champions in the past have been Senator Skinner, who did the felony murder bill 1437. We have
Lonnie Hancock.
Lonnie Hancock did SB 260, 261. We have Dave Cortese, who had pushed SB 300, which failed. This last legislative session did SB 94, which has been put on hold. So I think that is something that we are looking to see if we are going to, for this next legislative cycle, to see if we're going to pick back up on SB 94, which there's a lot of carve-outs, and I'm not a fan of carve-outs because I don't want to leave anyone behind. But sometimes things have to be cut in order to get a bill to get pushed forward. So that is an LWOP bill that hopefully will take, it will move it forward in our next legislative cycle.
I think if I could just say this real quick, if you would like to be more informed, your email address, and we can possibly share information out through maybe a listserv. So when things come up, you'll be able to kind of participate. And yeah, thank you, Satina and Heidi. So.
Awesome. Anyone else? Last question? No? Yeah?
So you've obviously created just a loving space. I could feel it when I walked in, meeting people, hanging out with Ray for a bit, talking with Fred. There's just this energy of just love and compassion. So I just wanted to know, is there a long-term goal for this space? Because right now it's pretty damn good. So I'm wondering if there's just a long-term specific plan for it.
Come on. Come on. No. Modest. So yeah, we really want to we want this space to just increase and to be more and have more of these meaningful conversations to be able to help as many people as we can, and mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, this is what we want to do. And I am not responsible for the feeling that you had when you came in here. I'm just a recipient of that. That's Kristen. This is all her. She really put her being into this, and she really thought about this. And we all bring different things to this space, and what she's brought in here is there hasn't been a person who hasn't walked in here and said that, wow, this is really something, But yeah, the long-term goal is, we really want to just increase and just embrace and love on everybody who comes here, and when they leave here to have this feeling that you're going to have too. So.
Well, if there's no more questions, I will ask one last question, and it's a really, really big one, Alan. I don't know how you're going to answer this. I'm so curious, what your first meal was when you got out, and
That's not a big question.
I'm kidding.
So it could have been, but yeah.
Because then we started talking about state food and
yeah. So while I was incarcerated, I ate horribly. The food, the options weren't the best, but we used to have these food sales, and we donate the money from the food sales to Children's Hospital or domestic violence programs and different things like that. And we had, what is the name of that place? It's a franchise, Panda Express. And I ate Panda Express until my mouth hurt. It was so good. And so when I came home, they were like, well, what do you want to eat? And I was like, Panda Express. Like, I don't know what I want. So that was the first meal when I came out was Panda Express.
Can you still eat it, or you're done? Are you done with Panda Express?
I'm done with Panda Express.
That seems like a good place to end the conversation. Thank you all for doing this with us. It's been really nice to talk to you, Alan. We don't talk weirdly nearly as much as when you were incarcerated. But maybe that's how it should be. And big thanks to Cindy and Kristen for letting us use this space. I hope we'll use it again. And yeah, like hang out and like meet each other if you want to. And there's cookies and coffee. And thank you all for being here so much. Really appreciate it.